Hey, it's MJ from the Coaches Panel. I hope you're well. You're officially halfway through your fantasy footy season in AFL Fantasy, but you're only 1 week through the multi-bye rounds. Was it kind to you, or did it give you a few little curses along the way? Regardless, I've assembled the Coaches Panel and a special guest on this episode to help you navigate through the next couple of weeks of the buys, as well as the dreaded back half of your 2024 season. Joining me on this episode as we chat through all the players that we should be looking as trade targets, who we should be moving out, and what we can do over the next month to set ourselves up for success. I've got Mini Monk back on the podcast. Hello, mate. How are you?
Not quite so solo, you and me this week, not just the duo pod. We've got a couple of other guests that are joining us, and it's good to be back on and be able to try some fantasy through the buys.
Yeah, we have assembled a large portion of the panel and a guest. Again, if you're watching this on YouTube, you already know who they are. Just some of the blessing that comes with being able to watch the episode. Also on the episode, he's fellow co-founder of the Coaches Panel, winner of another format that we don't talk about on this AFL Fantasy Strategy Roundtable, and the only person that refuses to show his face on the podcast, streams, and video. It's Rids. Hello, mate. How are you?
I'm better than your internet connection, Mr. MJ.
Oh, good to hear it's firing at its absolute pinnacle best. Now, mate, a couple of weeks ago, you made a promise that there would be another guest that you'd bring on to the podcast that would navigate their way. Would you like to introduce the special guest on the podcast this week? Again, if you're watching, you already know, but who's our special guest you got lined up for us this week?
Well, the thing is, mate, I could get you to introduce it, and then we can get like half sentences at the same time, and then get another half sentence a couple of seconds later, and it would be great. But no, this guy, everyone would know. He's pretty much the main man or the second man. I don't know what it is these days, because I do hear him hosting the HatChat pod more than what Jake does these days. But it's Mr. DC. How are you, sir?
I'm well, thanks, Rids. Thanks for having me on, guys. Pleasure to be on again, and for my first in-season Coaches Panels pod.
Well, we've done a pre-season, we've done an in-season, and we might need to get a post-season one so we can complete the trifecta. There's a lot of stuff we got to talk about through this podcast. A lot of help coaches are wanting to get through this next couple of weeks. Another week of mid-season bye rounds. This time, just the two teams are missing this week. It is Port Adelaide and Fremantle, but the same bye round rules apply, which is best 18. If they're on the field, they will take out all your rubbish scores and put on the 18 best will count, and you will still have up to 3 trades for available use this week. So lots of stuff we can do. But lads, I guess I want to frame our trading options this week with a little bit of an assignment for you. There are 4 clubs that are coming back available to us off the bye. It's Brisbane. We've also got North Melbourne. We've got the Giants, and we've got the Swans. So 4 really important clubs for us. What I'm going to do is I'll assign you in a second a line that I want you to find an option for me under each of the following 4 categories. I want you in every single line to find me the best premium from those 4 teams that coaches should be able to consider as a trade-in option this week. I then want you to help me find a great value pick that we can do there. Then for those that want to create some separation from either the pack that are hunting them or to create some separation and some differentiation in their team, go and find me something unique. And then for the coaches that their year has just gone absolutely pear-shaped, that just like, I'm playing AFL Fantasy for fun this year. It's not for ranks. It's not for wins. It's clearly for the kicks. We're going to do that. So in about 60 seconds, Rids, you're going to hit us with the defenders. So you've got a 60-second banner of time to look through all of those categories. Top premium, best value, going unique, and something just for fun in our defensive line using those 4 teams. DC will give you the privilege of the midfield. So you can take care of that line for us. Mini Monk, you can have the forwards. I won't be so kind to curse you with the terrible division. I'll absorb that one alongside any crappy internet I might have to be able to bring that for you as well. So Rids, let's hit the defenders, mate. Who have you got? Who's the best primo? Who's some nice, unique options we could look at? Hit me with those 4 categories of who you've got and why.
Okay, first things first, MJ, you've given me a terrible category, okay? Because every team in the world has 6 premium defenders right now. So you haven't given me much top, okay? So, but pretty much every team out there, the best premium defender, there's only one. Well, there's 2 really, but coming off their bye, there's only one. And his name is Harry Sheasel. But the problem with Harry Sheasel, okay, is he's now had that change of role. And a lot of people have actually traded out of him a couple of weeks ago when that was pretty much called out by Clarkson Radio. But he's well and truly ahead of every other premium defender coming off the bye. It's pretty much him, it's Whitfield, and then you got nothing else, Radio. There's a guy that I'm not going to use as a defender, and I'm going to leave it as a forward coming off the bye for Monk to go and pinch, but as the main premium, because he's the guy that he's on the edge of everyone's, well, not the edge, but the tip of everyone's tongue. Yeah, he's pretty much going to be traded into the majority of the teams this week. So, but the problem with Sheasel and Whitfield is they come with real worries. Okay, does Sheasel have enough in that role as mid to actually be able to pop a score big enough? And is he price still represents value or not? That's going to be really where it's at. But let's just have a quick look at him for a start. In the last 2 weeks, small sample size, I know, but he had a hybrid role 2 games ago. I'd like to say last week and the week before, but it's not because we've had the bye. He scored 119, but the majority of that was when he rolled back into the backline role that he had after whoever it was that got injured at the time, and he went and started doing everything, okay? Last game, though, however, we saw a predominantly full midfield role against Port Adelaide. Now, Port Adelaide is a very restrictive midfield matchup by nature. Whether they were or not without Rosie and a few others in the team at that point in time is questionable. He still scored 106, but he had 88% CBAs the last game. He didn't roll back into defence. He was actually going from midfield, pushing back and actually getting into the transition points as part of that. So I actually think he might be 100, 105 mid, like potentially between now and the end of the year, which means technically he's our best premium defender coming off the bye. The question would be, though, if you flip it, are you willing to trade out of a Sheasel or a Whitfield coming off the bye? That's going to be the more intriguing conversation, not whether you're going to trade into them, but whether you're going to trade out of them, because there are other categories around. I also mentioned the guy that Monk will pinch as the premium later on, as the premium forward. There are options that you can actually, do a little bit of a swing-a-ding, free up a bit of cash if you don't like some of the rookies this week. So a Sheasel to like whoever it is, and I know I'm trying to be mysterious about the name, but I'm going to go jump into my value pick. Nick Haynes.
Please.
I think Nick Haynes right now is representing amazing value. He was not as much as a couple of weeks ago, but his last 3 average in this role since he was sub is 94 in this role as that halfback Ash went out injured. He's still got another 2 to 3 weeks with that calf, and they do tend to linger. And Nick Haynes is actually priced 75 right now. So I think he's absolutely an option moving forward to make a bit of cash, get you through the buys, and then to upgrade to whoever that means, okay? Now, I think the other category I had was most fun. The most fun one is clear, Mr.
That and unique, yes.
Oh, well, they're both same thing, yeah? Most fun, unique, because no one's going to be on this guy. He's not even a defender yet, the guy that I'm going to mention, okay? And his name's Darcy Tucker. So last round, he came back into the North Melbourne team and he absolutely racked it up. But what you'll find, okay, is he wasn't part of the kick-in structure or anything like that. So there's actually room, like there's scope for improvement in this role. Like there's scope for a consistency in this role. It's going to take big balls to jump on this guy straight away, especially as a mid. But I can tell you now, mate, anyone that pops 132 in that role at North Melbourne after a few years of watching Aaron Hall, Jack Zeeble, and a few others, Harry Sheasel at the start of the year, playing this role and absolutely racking it up, there's no reason why this guy can't come in and actually go 90, 95, find his role in the team, cement his spot in the best 22. Of course, there's a few ifs around this, but I mean, that's what the most fun's all about, yeah? It's priced at 71 too.
Ooh, okay. So a bit of fun, bit of unique, and not even in the positional line that I asked you to cover. So nothing could be more Rids than that in doing so. But I do love that as a shout out. So while we're talking about the mids, maybe DC, I've given you what could be argued the generous line, the midfield using those same categories. So again, just a reminder, who's that top premium option? Who's the best value? If we're looking to go unique and we want to have some fun, we've allocated you the midfield as the guest. You can take the line that could give you the most options to consider. Walk us through your picks, DC. Who have you got and why?
Yeah, thanks, MJ. Yeah, I feel as though there's quite a few here I could have gone with, so I'm going to give a couple of special mentions. So for the best premium, I'll give a special mention to Errol Goulden, but I've actually got Josh Dunkley, I think is likely to be the highest scoring player from here to the end of the season. He's been the highest scoring amongst any of the guys coming off the round 12 bye in the midfield so far. I can't see why his role would change. We know he's never likely to get tagged. He's averaged 111 for the season so far, priced at 114, so he's not cheap. But if you are really just trying to bolster your midfield and you've got enough cash, you might have done a couple of downgrades last week and you've got some money to burn this week, then I think he's a really good option. He hasn't gone below 90 this year, which means he's a pretty nice captain option as well, and he's gone 9 tons out of 11 with a high score of 151 against the Gold Coast in that ridiculous game that Zorko also went nuts. So I really like him as an option if you can afford him, but obviously not a lot of value there. So it depends on where your team's at, maybe how many more spots you still have to upgrade. For the best value, I would say this one's reasonably obvious, but some people maybe that have owned him over the last 6 weeks or so might debate it a little bit, and it's Tom Green. It's just very hard to say he's not value at 761K. I personally brought him in at 930 that week that he got injured on 7, and everyone was talking about the fact he was valued that week. So he's now almost 200K cheaper, priced at 88, which if you knew at the start of the season Tom Green was going to be priced at 88, we'd be all over that. 95 average for the season, which again is going to be affected by that 7, but he's also not put up a ton since that injury. Average 109 last year was clearly a top 8 midfielder, and was averaging 109.7 before that injury. So he's shown this year for a 7-game run that he's able to match it with the top mids. He started incredibly well before his bye. I guess the question mark is, do we trust that he's back to full fitness? Is he going to come out of the bye and return to the old Tom Green, or is this a bit of the new normal? I do think maybe that ankle might have been still bothering him a touch, and he copped a bit of attention in a couple of his more recent games as well. So a few little question marks there, but I think at his price, it's a bit of a no-brainer if you don't have him. Particularly the fact that they've had the bye, it makes it a very easy pick in my mind. Best unique, this might raise a few eyebrows because he hasn't been fantastic this year and wasn't a great starting pick for a lot of people, but I'm going to go with LDU, down to 836K.
Come on.
Bit of a special mention to Finn Callahan as well, who I'm reasonably hot on. He's just a bit of an awkward price at mid 600s. But I do think he has a lot of opportunity with Cornelio out at the moment and with Kelly out. So I don't mind it if you want to do something really, really unique. But I think LDU is the slightly safer one. It's the less crazy one. He's averaged 95 for the season, priced at 97. In his last 3, he's put up 3 tons and has averaged 111 over that period. So it does seem as though he's starting to find a little bit of form. We've also seen the last 2 years, he's actually had much better second halves of the season. So last year, averaged 105 after his bye with a 6-game stretch of 112 to finish his year. And the year before, he averaged 106 after his bye as well. So he does tend to have better second halves of the season. So it'd be interesting to see whether that trend continues for him. And then a guy that Rids has already mentioned, I actually think Sheasel moving into that midfield, it might have just changed up that mix a little bit. So I wonder whether that might actually be helping LDU. There does seem to be a bit of correlation there. So as someone else who's a natural ball winner, Georgia Wardlaw's obviously going to be a very good player, but Sheasel's a lot more damaging. I wonder whether he might actually start getting the attention instead of LDU as well. So he's definitely one I'm pretty keen on. And again, is right up the top of my list for trade-ins this week. And then most fun to own, couldn't really go past Chad Warner for this one at 889K. He's probably top 3 of the Brownlow at the moment. I'm not sure he's necessarily value. He's averaging 102, priced at 103. But talk about fun to watch. Like Sydney are clearly the best side at the moment. So you get to watch Sydney games a bit more, and Chad Warner's close to their best player. He kicks goals for fun out of the midfield. He's kicked 19 for the season. So if you love celebrating a goal, he's a good one to go with. So they're my 4.
Nice. Ripping. Great picks. Love them. And the fact we got an LDU reference in there too. I'm down for that as well. Minimum. Talk us through the forward line. Many would say it might be an easy call, but it could be some controversy coming our way when we talk about the best premium, because there's a couple of big options through there. Talk us through those 4 categories. Who have you got coming off the bye in our forward line?
Yeah, I've had to have a bit of a think about this one and shuffle where players actually land in categories, because it looks better than it actually feels when you're actually trying to pick 4 players to fit these categories. Right. It doesn't feel great. I'm not envious of your task of having to manage the ruckman next. But for premium, I've actually gone with Zach Fisher. And the reason why I'm comfortable calling him a premium is because of how well he's scored in his last 3 games. He's going at 112 in his last 3, which I think puts him either first or second for forwards at the moment. And to think that you can get him for, that price tag at the moment it's just absolutely ridiculous. He's priced at 750K. He's got 112 his last 3, 95 his last 5. The run should be fine. Sheasel's clearly moved into the midfield. There's no McCoach again this week. We don't know how long until he's back. So I think that he is the premium to trade in. In terms of the value, this might raise a bit of an eyebrow to some people, but I actually think that Tom Powell still actually presents value. I think it'll take a very brave coach to trade into him, but he's averaged 84 for the year and he's only priced at 76. And he actually hasn't had that bad of a floor. He's only had 1 game where he's had a really, what you would call a stinky score, which he scored a 34 in against Adelaide. And then everything else has been 70 and above. But what really kind of makes me look at him a bit more is that his CBAs have decreased a little bit over the last 3 weeks, but his scoring consistency has actually gone up. And the fixtures that he's been able to manage those scores and haven't been the easiest. His last 3 have been Gold Coast up on the Gold Coast and then played against Port Adelaide and Essendon, which are notably quite restrictive teams. And the reason I've had to be a bit weird with my shuffling will come as with regards to the unique, because I'm actually going Peatling as the unique. And you might be thinking, why are you trading into a guy who scored a 57 in his last game? What's up there? He's still averaging 80 in his last 3. And the other thing that I noticed is that he's had a really big CBA bump. There's no Cornelio, there's no Kelly. There has to be some sort of body that goes into the midfield. I'm not sure that Ward is going to be the player that's going to be up to going into that midfield for an extended bulk of time. So I can see the world where Peatling gets 40 to 50% of CBAs. And with the fixture coming up, I can see a world where he presents, a lot of value because he is, a very unique player. He's going to be a lot of value. And then in terms of the fun to own, is there really any other player that you can have in the fun to own category from any of these teams, bar the only Toby Green? You're talking about a player who might get a short injection of CBAs into the midfield, and he's shown that he can score pretty well when he gets a short injection to CBAs. And either you love him or you hate him, but if you love him, he is absolutely fun to own.
It's true. It's true. I didn't know where you were going with that setup of a fun to own, but you got me. So well done. My fun to own is definitely not fun to own. We'll see how we go. I'll bring us home with the rucks. This is the Mordor of the line right now, because politely, the only reason you're looking to trade into a ruck mostly this week is if you're a Jordan Sweet owner and you don't want to admit that you've been anywhere near a Jordan Sweet owner because it's just been a chaotic 6 weeks. Maybe you're an LJ at R2 as well, but politely, if you're looking for a ruck this week, you've not got Gorn. You've probably already owned one of the options I'm going to mention to, if not two of them. The rucks have been a pain point if you are looking for a ruck this week. Adeline, let me walk you through the categories. I think probably the best premium in terms of from now to the rest of the year, based on matchups, I'm probably just going to say is Brodie Grundy at 886K. If you look at the next 5 weeks, 4 of them are really favorable matchups. They're all green matchups. According to DFS Australia, he's pretty much his last 5 is running at his seasonal average, and pretty much outside of round 2, he's not really burnt coaches too bad. I know Cherry's probably the other name you could throw into the mix through that, who's comparable in a bunch of different lines, and we'll talk about him. But to me, Grundy, based on matchups, should be a stronger performing option over, in contrast to Tristan Cherry over the next 4 to 5 weeks. If you're looking for value, not mentioning Soldo, don't worry. It could be a Kieran Briggs. He's coming in at 753K. 4 of his top 5 scores have come in the past 6 weeks, and he's going on an average of 96. He's a guy that last year we trusted him to be a 100 guy. I'm not so sure he can be that for the rest of the season, but if you're looking for some value, he's probably one of the only 2 options. If you want unique, I wanted to say Braden Pruce just so we could get him on as the once per podcast, but there is not a chance you're looking at him. Your unique's actually Oscar McInerney. He's gone at 98 in his last 3. He's not even in 1%. So he is the definition of it. You're not doing it, but 2 of the next 3 are pretty easily between rounds 16 to 20, though. He's got the worst matchup in the league. So you're not going there. If you're spending 720 odd thousand on anyone this week, you're looking in a forward line or a midfield line. You're not looking to touch the rucks whatsoever. And fun, politely, I've only got one other category and one other player to mention. So it's the big Tristan Cherry in there at 849K. He's been the best ruck for a bunch of coaches this year that again have stuck with Jordan Sweet, but 3 scores in the last 6 over 120, only 1 score under 80 all year. He's probably been the best mid-price buy of the year for a lot of coaches, and understandably why. But again, politely, unless you're sucking it up with a Sweet or a Jackson at R2 over this week, you're just not really looking to do it. Most people have a combination of Grundy, Cherry, Gorn, Marshall, or English, and maybe used a Jackson through there with some colour last week to get themselves out of jail. But politely, it's the division of all of the 4 that the lads have walked you through on this episode that you're probably not needing too much time and support. As we've heard, everybody's top premium option, best value, something fun and something unique. Does there feel like there's any DC introduced the phrase on the podcast, certainly not into the human language, but certainly into this of some notable omissions that are there. Are there any notable omissions that you've heard someone mention that you go, well, what about this, DC? You got something for us?
Yeah, there's a couple. And I wouldn't say they're necessarily big names. The first one is Lekalia. As a defender, I don't think there's too many defenders at the moment that are cheaply priced that are coming off the bye. But if we remember back, he had that fantastic game just before his bye. I think he's priced low to mid 300K. So he's not really rookie price. He's a little bit inflated. I'm not sure he's going to be a huge scorer, but I do think he's going to get a run of games in the team now on the back of that performance. And even earlier in the season when he's come in, he's shown that he's capable at the level. He's a high draft pick. I think GWS are going to want to get some games into him. So he'd probably be one I'd be interested in if you need a downgrade in the defensive line. And then the other one, which is not really an option to bring in, but I think his status actually affects a couple of the other picks, in particularly Zach Fisher and Darcy Tucker, is Colby McKercher and his timeline from return to injury. He's still listed as a TBC for his foot stress injury. So, but if we do hear that is looking like it might only be a week or two away, one, you need to be keeping an eye on Colby, because I think he is going to be a decent option when he comes back in, if he's still got that role. But then two, what does that mean? I think particularly for Tucker, but also for Fisher as well. So he's definitely one I'd be keeping tabs on, even if it's not immediately as a trade-in option.
I just wanted to touch on
Likalia
a little bit. So Jack Buckley's coming back, I believe, this week after the bye. And I think Aaliyah, in that post-match presser that he had, or the interview that he gave, he was like, I'm not sure whether I'm going to hold my spot or not. I don't know whether he's being modest, and because he does seem like a modest type of guy, just doesn't want to really talk himself up. So I'm not sure how much to read into what his comments were, but I just wasn't sure about his job security after those comments. And his game was outstanding. He was almost their best defender in that game. Well, I think he probably was comfortably, really. But, it was just one of those tricky ones. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware that that's exactly why I because I've been looking at trading into him this week as the downgrade rookie option. But I think for the other pod that we do, that's not AF, he's probably absolutely on the ballpark figure for that one. I don't know which one that one is. It's different two letters anyway, MJ.
I think the interesting one that I had, and this is a player that's had a real role shift, especially in the last 3 weeks, it's actually Jared Berry. He's getting a lot of CBAs now for Brisbane. They need to try something to change up their midfield mix. It looks like McCluggage is the one who's had the bit of the drop in the CBAs. And if you look at how Berry's been able to go in his last 4, he's gone 140, 131, 110, 78, 107. There is a potential that there's 100K's worth of value there if he can go at 110 for the rest of the season, which is, he's been able to show that in stretches. Whether he's been able to do that in a consistency for, a 10-week block, it's probably yet to be seen. But it's a really pottish option if you're looking to try and get away into that Brisbane midfield.
And I want to mention another Brisbane midfielder, MJ, because I think this guy's sort of gone under the radar a little bit just recently. And it's Lachie Neale, okay? I don't think people have actually caught on. His last 4, he's gone 137, 80, 122, and 100 in his last 4 outings. He's looking a lot better. He is moving well. He's another one that I wouldn't discount. And it seems like every year, in AF, we seem to have, after the bye, Lachie Neale is value. And we seem to go jump on him because he does represent it. But again, I think he's actually representing that again this year, believe it or not.
Just on that, Lachie Neale, would you go Lachie Neale or LDU if you're looking at the two? Because I did consider Neale around the same price.
Good.
Yeah, that's a good... I would actually probably lean to Neale only because I'm more certain of his role. With that North midfield and Clarkson, I just don't know that dynamic. Like Sheasel into the midfields, then obviously Simpkin, what's going to happen with him? Then there's going to be McKercher, another one that could go in there. LDU's going to be around the ballpark. We all expect him to be in the main mid at North, but we've seen Clarkson just throw those magnets around the spot. Like, we just don't know what he's going to be doing in there. So I would be probably leaning to Neale, but I don't love the selection at all. Like, I'm just raising him because I think he's gone under the radar those last 4.
Yeah, I agree. He's gone under the radar.
That's a good shot.
I think I would still pick LDU of the two. I get that the midfield mix might change, but you still need someone to be the stalwart in there. And LDU is a player that North Melbourne have to build their side around. He has to be that primary mid for them. And the North Melbourne run from now until the end of the season, particularly for inside midfield, is very good. And so if you didn't own LDU, I actually don't really have many objections as to why I wouldn't trade into him this week. Like, unless you have many other higher priorities or you just don't have the cash to get him, I think he's actually quite a good buy this week.
Yeah, it was actually the same point I was going to make.
I like his last five, especially DC.
Yeah, I was just going to say it was the same point I was going to make about his fixture, which I glossed over, actually. I should have mentioned that when I first spoke about him, but he's got the Eagles' first game coming back. He obviously plays for North Melbourne, so their fixture is probably a little less important because he's playing for North Melbourne. But, yeah, I mean, they have to play the Eagles twice for the rest of the season, and their last 5 games to finish the season, this is probably more important if you're playing for leagues, but they finished the season with Geelong, Richmond, West Coast, the Bulldogs, and Hawthorn. So it's a very, very soft finish to the year.
And I would say if you're going to be going against the Eagles and you're an inside midfielder, this might be the week to do it because there'll be no Harley Reid and there'll be no Tim Kelly.
My one concern with him this week, and it's one of the few reasons I'm slightly put off going for him, is that Dom Rashid's actually been doing some tagging jobs. So if they decide that with Reid out, they need to shut down one of the opposition players, I still think he's probably the first target. But as I said, I think Sheasel's potentially more damaging by foot, so maybe he starts getting a bit of attention as well.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to throw out there as well is: would you do LDU or would you save $100,000 and go for a Tom Green, for instance, or the better part of $100,000, especially with the limited downgrade rooks this week? It's just one of those little dynamics, and again, it's going to be really what's your makeup of your team. What are the premiums you've had go through? If you own a lot of round 12 premiums like Zorko, like, that others may not, Goulden, Dunkley, those types, you probably do have the availability and the options to go into a round 14 or 15 by mid in that instance. So it's going to be really, really specific to what your makeup of your team is already.
I guess my main thinking with regards to that and with regards to splitting LDU and Tom Green is that if you're going to pick one of them this week and picking another the next week, because in reality we only get 2 additional teams next week that we want to pick from in Port Adelaide and Fremantle, LDU has a break even of 80 and is coming against West Coast this week. Whereas if you're going to be going for Tom Green, he's got a break-even of 106 and he's coming against Hawthorn this week, who have been a bit more restrictive to inside midfielders over the last few years. They've been getting good and they've had Will Day come in back into that team. If you can wait that week on Tom Green and still get him at around about that 760, 770K marker and also get LDU this week, that's a way that you could look to play it.
Yeah, absolutely. It is for sure. There's an interesting player that I think is getting a little bit of conversation, but I want to put him on the agenda for you both. He's owned in, not both, all three of you actually. He's owned in 25% of coaches own Jeremy Sharp. He's been a phenomenal moneymaker. To call him a cash cow is slightly unfair on him based on he's not being a rookie, but that's what he was priced at for us this year. His last 5 or 6 weeks has just been sublime for us and done absolutely everything we could have asked of him. To have him generating, what is it, like 20, 30,000 to move to a Tom Green. Like it's ridiculous that how much money he has made for us this year and how easy a move it is to a player like a Tom Green, let alone some others. But he's not necessarily a must trade this week. He's not necessarily a must hold this week. So going around the panel here, for those that are considering holding Jeremy Sharp, we'll come back to the why you could trade him in a moment. What would be the mindset of why you'd be looking to hold him? Because he's still got a really favorable break-even, 70 based on recent form. He's probably still got at least another 20 to 40K he could potentially make for us and be good coverage through the buys. But why are we looking to hold Jeremy Sharp this week and get us through the next couple? Anyone want to lead us off for where the holding
I can definitely do it.
Ritz, maybe?
So I actually like his next 2 matchups, MJ, and then I do like his round 17 matchup in 2 weeks after the buys. So his next 2 matchups are Western Bulldogs at Marvel Stadium. I do like that as a matchup. And then he's got Gold Coast over at Optus. So I actually think they're friendly, not friendlier, but friendly type matchups for the way that he plays, because he keeps his width. He actually lives out on the wing. They do look for him a lot more. His last 5, as you mentioned, he's gone, I think it was something like 80 at the lowest in his last 5. He's gone 86, 118, 88, 105, and 80. So he is going to be a very handy addition to help you cover if you're heavy on round 14 or round 15 players. He's going to actually fill a hole for you nicely, especially the mids. And if you look at them, the round 15 and 16 guys, we got the round 15, 16, 14, 15 guys. We got Dawson's,
14,
we've got
15.
Zerrits, we've got all the highly owned guys, Bontempelli, like whoever it is, okay, we're all going to be looking for that extra. And I'm sure a lot of teams have got a few red dots here and there as well on the bench. He could really pop 100 on any of those matchups on round 14 and 15. And if he does, he's actually going to be a nice cover for you in your best 18 setup. So that's the reason why you would hold.
Yeah.
DC, talk me almost on the flip side. Oh, sorry, Mini Monk, jump in.
Yeah, I was going to say, he is a very tricky one. I mean, those last 5 games, it's very hard to trade on someone who's been able to go at, essentially 95 in his last 5 games. It's putting it up there with, you'd be happy to run that as an M8 for the rest of the season until he's your last upgrade, really. My biggest, I guess, the pros and cons that I can see with it is he's on the bye this week. He came into our teams for the purpose of making cash, and he's done that in spades. I can see where Rids is coming from in terms of the next 5 being relatively favorable, particularly the next 2 against the Dogs and Gold Coast. But I would just caution that his worst score of the year so far was actually against the Dogs at Optus, and what you would consider to be a relatively friendly matchup, and he only managed a 39. I mean, if he goes that next week, he's not only just stole his cash and he's on the way back down, and his break-even probably skies to about 110, 115 off the back of that nearly. You'd want to be holding through Gold Coast, through Sydney, through Richmond, through Hawthorn, and probably just flipping it round 19. So you kind of have to go in for the whole shebang if you're going for it. But there is a world where he still is able to manage an 85, 90 average over the next 5 weeks. And if he can do that and be your M8 until round 19, until you're doing your final upgrade, then that is an absolutely great position to be in.
I just wanted to call out
the 5 weeks prior.
Sorry, I just want to push over to DC in a sec, but I just wanted to add one more thing, okay?
Yes, that's where we're heading.
You've got bigger issues in your team right now, whether it's his name is Harley Reid, whether it's Darcy Wilson, who's got a break-even of 89 and will start dripping a bit of cash. There is potential here, okay, that if you're in a situation with your team where Sharp is in your 3 trade-out options, you're going pretty well. I had quite a few names when I was having a look at my team that would be seen as a higher priority this week. Now, I know we could hold Wilson and hope that he pops one of those scores and everything else, but he's in that same situation that Monk just mentioned a few weeks ago with Sharp. If he does pop one more sub 60 score, his cash is stalled. And he's also a first year, 18-year-old, going through the heavy riggers, the heavy running loads and everything else. There is potential that he is tiring, even though he's an endurance beast. There is potential. So if it was a choice between holding Sharp on the best buy round to then utilize him in the 2 rounds after, and getting off a Wilson quickly.
Sure.
But it does really depend on who you're trading in. If it's a Dunkley and you need that cash and you're really big on Dunkley, I 100%, knock yourself out, because Sharp isn't going to be there in your final completed team, yeah? This is just about how you manage your buys. So Dunkley will be. There's no problems about that. Is it a trade-in options to get to Zorko? And I mean, if we want to be sitting on that line, Radio, 35-year-old, Hemi problems. We've been saying this all year, MJ. This guy is absolutely...
Yeah, he still keeps scoring.
Yeah, I mean, how many times can we do that without actually having... Yeah, we're going to have to get him at some stage, yeah, if he stays in the park. But
Sure.
I just wanted to call that part out as well before DC runs with...
Yeah.
DC, your take?
Yeah, I mean, there's some good points from everyone there. I think the thing for me that's really important is your structure that you've gone with across the bye round. So how many did you have play last week in round 12? How many did you have on the bye last week in round 12? How many do you have on the bye this week? I think is really critical, because if you've only got 2 or 3 on the bye this week, you're going to find getting to 22 playing this week very easy. I would recommend then that you're probably best off keeping Sharp and letting him help you on the next 2 weeks, unless, as Rid said, he helps you to get to the player you absolutely want. But then you might also have other options around the same price to do that, whether it's a Bonner or, as you said, a Wilson. So I think that's quite critical, is looking at how many you're going to have playing. Can you field 22 easily? If you like my co-host on HatChat, Jake, he's got 6 on the bye this week. So it's quite easy for him to trade him, because he's probably one of his weakest players on the bye. But I do think that's a reasonably unusual setup. So I'd be on the side of keeping him for the next 2 weeks. But personally, in my mind, he's one of 2 options. You either trade him this week or you trade him after round 15. Because I think most teams are probably down to anywhere between 1 to maybe 3 or 4 rookies left on field at most. So you'd be hoping that we're getting down to almost no rookies on field coming out of the buys with the 9 trades we've got left. So I'm not sure you want to run him at M8 for too long after that, because as good as he's been, he's still only averaging 80, and you're then starting to give up 20 to 30 points to other teams with a proper premium at M8. So I think by the time we come out of the buys, you probably want to be looking to upgrade him.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair call. The 5 weeks prior to this great weeks that we've had from him, he went 39, 74, 65, 106, and there was a 63 in there as well. So certainly he is at his prime and going well for us, and all the planets have aligned, metaphorically speaking. But it does feel like a really very team-dependent, both in mindset, in structure, and intentionality of what you've been building towards doing over these previous weeks, heading to the start of the buys, and then how you're planning to evolve your team over the next couple of weeks. And maybe that's where we look at landing the podcast. There is, what can coaches do this week? We've said it's the easiest to navigate in terms of getting 22 players on field. What can coaches do to navigate it, Minimug?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing to consider, and this is the same lesson that we learned last year with regards to the split buys that we now have, where it's not 6-6-6, it's 4-2-6-6, is you can start to plan for your upgrade targets next week as well. You know, we've got the 4 teams this week in Brisbane, GWS, Sydney, and North Melbourne. We know what the targets are from those 4 teams. We've just talked about them inside the podcast. Now we've got the targets from Port Adelaide and Fremantle to consider for next week as well. So it's about, you know, structuring up. If you want to be bringing in the likes of Jordan Clark or Luke Ryan or Dan Houston next week, you need to try and open up a spot in your defensive line, which is quite hard because most teams are already running with 6, if not 7 or 8 defenders with their DPP kicked in. So that's what you got to start to look for. You got to start to try and shore up your weaknesses. So most people are only running maybe 4 or 5 premiums in their forward lines. You've got the likes of Zach Fisher, who's available for you this week. Dane Zorko, who's available for you. Isaac Kearney, I'm assuming a lot of coaches will already have it. If you don't, you could go into him. Tom Powell as well. Look to shore up the weakest lines that you have in terms of the number of premiums, and do the calculation as to where all your players are going to end up coming out of the buys. You know, if you know in round 15 that there's a target that you want to be trading into off of that round 14 buy and they're going to be in the midfield, make sure you save a space in your midfield to be able to trade to that player. Don't go suddenly getting in the likes of LDU and Josh Dunkley this week because you think that they're the best premiums to get and leave yourself one short coming into round 15 or out of the buys.
That's good. DC, any advice for coaches that are eyeing the back couple of weeks of the buys and the post thing? Is there anything with this week, given we're only missing 2 and outside of a fellow HatChat member that's running a beautiful 6, we're all probably ranging between 2 to 3 for the most part, maybe 4 for some. But what advice could you give us to set us up for success for the coming fortnight?
Yeah, we spoke a little bit about it last night on HatChat for our pod this week, and I think one thing I noticed this week, I had a shocking week in fantasy this week. It was pretty frustrating, mainly down to guys like Jordan Dawson and Bonner not really doing what I wanted to do. But what surprised me was how far I actually dropped, considering the rest of my team wasn't horrendous. So what that says to me is that maybe a lot of the teams around me had more players, or specifically more premiums not on the bye this week, so more premiums playing. I had 6 missing, but I'm looking at some of the teams that top scored for the week, and there's teams there with 1 and 2 premiums that were on the round 12 bye. So what that says to me is that there's going to be some teams that are very, very heavy in round 14, and I think specifically round 15. So if you haven't looked at round 15 yet, I think this is the perfect week to be tidying that up, because next week you're going to want to be trading out players that are not playing in round 14. But this week, as we spoke about, it's the easiest week. You should have 22 playing. So I think this week is the week to specifically look at working out which of the round 15 players you're going to want to move on, particularly if you know that you're going to have 5 or 6 that could go for you that week. You're not going to be able to trade them all out. So that would be what I'd be looking at, and trying to get as close as possible to that 20 plus on field that week, because I'm guessing a lot of teams are going to have anywhere between 7 to even 10 premiums on that bye, which means you're really going to be struggling to put up a decent score. So that'd be my focus this week, is tidy up round 15.
Yeah, round 15, like just in the midfield lines alone, where you've got Adelaide, Richmond, Collingwood, St Kilda, Bulldogs, Hawthorn, you could be missing a Bontempelli, Steele, Dawson, Day, just as like first thought names, let alone if you're then dropping down to some more uniquer type picks, where if you've looked at a Crisp, or you've been rolling Dacos through the midfield for some structural purposes. Maybe you've been loving the work of an Adam Treloar or something like that. So definitely
Rookies
just
as
in
well.
the midfield divisional line alone. And we're there. You've got Garcia as a red dot for a lot of people. Wilson, people are going for Bonner. People have been rolling for, like, as DC's mentioned, the pain is coming of round 15. If you felt like, last week was fine, this week's fine, that's great. Good news, you're doing fine. The bad news probably is in about a fortnight's time, as DC's waving a very nice flag for you about, you could have some pain coming your way, and so make some moves now to set you up for success. Ritz?
Yep. So, like, just to call on the rookies, okay? And before people go thinking that's why would I care about a rookie? Sullivan, okay? McAuliffe, Freya, for the Bulldogs. Yeah. Like, there's a lot of rookies there that are going to be on the bye round 15.
Charlie Dean.
Yep.
Yeah,
there is a lot. Like, and whether you went for a Harrison, whether it's like the list just keeps going, whether you're holding a Richards right now, like the list goes on and on and on and on. It's just ridiculous. So what I tend to do, okay, is I go get a spreadsheet. I fill out my team. I work out where are my premiums left to complete my team, in which line. So it might be, on this case, it might be 1 forward, it might be 2 mids, or it might be 1 mid, 1 forward, whatever it is, okay? And then I go, who do I want to fill that line? This week myself, okay, I'm deciding between Zorko and Goulden this week. I'm going, who do I want? Rightio. So I then go and look at the fixture over the next 2 weeks until the end of the year. Now, I've identified Goulden and Zorko as the guys I want to get. Who's the best one, and what's the priority per week? Like, do I trade into a Zorko this week based on break even or fixture, or do I then have the ability? So this week I'm going to go to a Goulden, okay? And I mean, someone like a Mottram's going to be filthy at me for telling everyone my trade plans. But the fact of the matter is, I'm going to go a Goulden this week over a Zorko, and I'll wait for Zorko the week after. But that's all about strategic about their matchups, because Zorko will play St Kilda. He's got St Kilda twice for the rest of the year. He's got Collingwood, I believe. He also has Melbourne in the next couple of rounds. And we saw what Fremantle defenders did to Melbourne on the weekend just gone. There's a lot of nice, friendly matchups for defenders in this place over the next period of time for Zorko. So that's why I just want to get through that first round after the bye for a 35-year-old to make sure his hamstrings do stay together on the bone, on his legs, without him actually going and doing something after having a break, okay, for a week. And then I'll trade into him after that. But that's how I do it. Now, others might be interested in going to a Tom Green or whatever else. I like the Goulden matchup of Geelong this week. That's how I'm making it, because it's really tossing the coin. Yeah, it doesn't really matter. Like, at the end of the day, we're all going to be targeting the same players between now and the end of the year. Like last week, Groupthink went to a Will Day, for instance. We've got Zach Fisher heading down the pathway now to this week. There's like, of course, there's going to be the lucky ones like whoever it was who jumped on Sexton a couple of weeks ago, like DC, who then had the ability to go jump on a Fisher the week after. But a lot of teams would have gone and looked for Sexton, the last one before the round 12. And then went and pivoted, okay? So it's just all about who's going to make you comfortable. How much cash do you need? How much of that bench hygiene do you have in your team? How many 400,000-500,000 rookies are sitting there on the bench that you can free up a bit of cash to get to the higher echelons? Because I can tell you now, if you're looking at Zorko this week and you're looking at Luke Ryan next week, we're talking $2 million players right now. One after the other. Do you have enough cash to then complete your M8 or your D7 or D6 or having a 23rd premium that we often like, whether it's good or not, who cares? Do we want to go down that path and have that bench cover, that you could swing around the place? Like, and this year, more than ever, we've got DPP everywhere this year, it seems like. So we can actually have a 23rd premium that covers pretty much all the lines, yeah? Whether it's going to be a Tom Powell and a Sexton, or whether it's going to be a Salem, or whoever it is, okay, at value, we're going to have a lot of options, okay, that we can go down. So that's what I would be looking at myself. And that is what I'm looking at myself this week.
Yeah, nice. Some good advice from all of you boys there, helping us navigate this round and setting us up for success over the next couple of weeks. DC, it's been an absolute pleasure having you back on the coaches panel. For people that haven't listened to HatChat yet, again, a great AFL fantasy focused podcast. We've got all the links for where you can find that audio podcast. Sometimes even do some Twitter live spaces as well that you can go and check out. Definitely one of the great AFL fantasy content podcasts that out there. But where can we get in touch with you and the rest of the team from HatChat? If we'd love to chat today or just want to go and interact with you more, where can we do that, mate?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. It's been great to chat. You can find us at HatChat AFL on X. I think we're on Facebook at the same handle. We've also got a private Facebook group for all our listeners as well, so you should be able to find that. And there's always a fair bit of discussion going on there. A bit of a shout out as well. We do have a Lord of the Buys League going on at the moment as well, which is run by our mate Urban, which is for the team with the most points across the 4 rounds of the buy. So you can find all the details for that on our Twitter page. If you go and have a look there, you'll find the league code.
Yeah, we'll put the links for the Twitter description and everything else you want to get in touch with DC and the team at HatChat. It's in the description of this episode, so make sure you click on that link. The boys have been doing a power of great work in the AFL fantasy community for a number of years, and absolutely one well worth checking out. Rids, as always, a pleasure, mate. Thanks for jumping on the pod.
Yeah, mate, it is the official sponsor of HatChat these days. I'm glad that DC was able to jump on.
Yeah. Thanks for organising it, Rich.
Yeah, well done, mate. And Bitty Monk, always a pleasure. It's nice to have some extra panel members and content creators sitting alongside it, so it's not just you stuck with me for a whole 35 minutes or so. So well done, mate.
Yeah, you're lucky. You're not a captive audience this week. You've got a few others to delegate speaking responsibilities to other than just myself.
Well, that's probably better for you. Other than that, hey, mate, as always, a pleasure. If you've loved the podcast you've got from the Coaches Panel in 2024 and you haven't subscribed to us, whether it be through Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else you get your podcasts, make sure you go and do that. I did say if you left a nice 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts last week, I'd read it out. Jai has done that. So, Jai, here comes some love for you. He says this. He loves the Coaches Panel, has been playing fantasy for well over a decade, and this is one of my go-to podcasts for guidance and deeper thinking about the game. Keep up the great works, lads. Cheers, Jai. No, thank you to you, Jai. Well done. That is a shout out. If you would like a shout out in an upcoming podcast, all you got to do is leave a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. We'll read that out for you as well. And if you haven't checked this out on YouTube, you can go and watch the videos. There's a unique video content piece that's landing over on YouTube that won't be getting released to our audio podcast platforms. So if you want to make sure you get every video we do and some unique stuff as well, make sure you search for the Coaches Panel over on YouTube. Subscribe. Make sure you've got the notifications on. So as soon as a video episode goes live, whether it's strategy roundtables or anything else, you can check that out. And then, of course, our Patreons, who are just some of the most incredible people in the AFL fantasy community. They financially support the Coaches Panel. They get a ton of bonus rewards and additional content, as well as the privilege of saying they're a Coaches Panel Patreon. If you would like to join our Patreon, the links for that, as well as everything else we've talked about, as well as getting in touch with DC and HatChat, you can find it in the description of this episode. Hey, good luck, friends. This round might feel like it's easy to navigate, but it is going to set you up for success for the coming rounds. I hope rookie roulette for the last few you've got on field is kind to you. I hope your early weekend VC nails it, so you're not stressing about a captain on a Saturday afternoon or evening. And from us here at the Coaches Panel and DC from HatChat, we wish you all the best heading into this week, and we can't wait to chat with you again real soon.